nothing out here in the quote unquote real world is as, uncomfortable as what we choose to put ourselves through in these races. Even when you're having a rough day, I mean, nothing comes close to that night 3 wrapped in a space blanket, shuffling along at 1.2 miles an hour. It really doesn't. So to have those experiences and be able to think back and call back to those feelings makes everything else feel, like something you can get through, like something you can conquer.
Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspects of running and what helps people to achieve success, however they define it, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. This episode is brought to you by Freedom Solar Power, the company I use to go solar on my house. When you go solar this July, you can qualify for no loan payments until next year. When I first started looking into solar, I thought it would be a clunky and expensive process. Going solar isn't as hard as you think it is, and Freedom Solar Power is a turnkey solution focused on educating the consumer and making sure they have all the information they need to make sure going solar is right for them, both financially and as a way to help the planet. Go solar this year and you won't make any payments until 2023. Get 60 days of deferred payments, and Freedom Solar will pay 3 months of your loan. It's time to break free from rising electricity costs. Freedom Solar operates in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, and Florida, but there are plenty of other great options nationwide. Thank you to Hydro for sponsoring this episode. Hydro is an immersive workout experience designed to bring the physical, mental, and emotional experience of on-water rowing straight to your home. Hydro workouts are quick, efficient, and low impact. Rowing for just 20 minutes a day provides you with a full body workout, which engages 86% of your major muscle groups. For context, cycling engages 44%. Head to hydro.com to check them out. That's hydrow.com to learn more. Be sure to use the code FTLR100 to save $100 on your order. Thank you to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode. Tracksmith is an independent running brand inspired by a deep love of the sport. Their spring collection is now available and features staples thoughtfully designed for this season of training. From their versatile session tops cut from a soft stretch knit to Lane 5 and Reggie short tights perfect for racing a marathon, these pieces are built to work as hard as you do. Tracksmith is a brand for committed runners like you and me, people who know that the best part of a busy day is squeezing in a workout. They offer products for training, racing, and rest days, which you know I'm a fan of, and create experiences that make running more rewarding, more connected, and more meaningful. Visit tracksmith.com/forthelongrun to see some of my favorite pieces, and all orders with the code FORTHELONGRUN will receive free shipping, and 5% of the purchase amount will be donated to the Michael J. Fox Foundation to help find a cure and support those living with Parkinson's. Welcome back. I have Kevin Goldberg joining me on the podcast today from just down the road. Kevin, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Thanks, John. Happy to be here.
Of course. So the first question is about as hard as your last race. Who is Kevin?
Who is Kevin? Oh man, if I could figure that out, maybe I'd be able to stop running 250-mile races. I live right down the road from you here in Colorado. I work at Training Peaks, and I like running ridiculously long distances. If I had to sum myself up in an elevator pitch.
Yeah, I've met you once, and that was my takeaway. So for you, what is a ridiculously long race? Because for some people, that's a 5K.
Sure, yeah, and for me, that's how it started. I mean, I started, running shorter races, training for a marathon, and then once I realized that ultra marathons were a thing, I was hooked. And for me today, super long distance races are things above 200 miles. I've been focused on that distance for about 3 or 4 years now.
So this podcast is aimed at exploring the why and understanding that the slogan is what helps runners stay motivated, and your desire to run 250 miles is like the epitome of this exploration, right? Like, what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated is the slogan. I can't believe I forgot it there for a second, but in some regards, that's what you've done. and that's what you've been doing these last 3 to 4 years. I don't know if the strong aspect is consistent across 250 miles, but let's first understand the progression to anything beyond 200 miles. So, how did you first get into running?
Sure. So I met my wife back in 2010ish, and she was actually training for the Chicago Marathon. So, it was kind of like, well, what are you doing this weekend? And she's like, well, I'm running 16 miles. So I ended up joining on those runs. And then it was like, well, if you're doing these training runs, you might as well run the race. Um, so I ran that race, was immediately hooked, loved it, loved the vibe, loved the community. Realized pretty quickly that I didn't love the work it would take to get faster at the marathon distance. So when I discovered ultras, it just felt like coming home. I was able to run slow in the woods and eat whatever I wanted. Sign me up. Um, and then, the progression from there was pretty exponential. As soon as I realized that there were distances above the distances I was running, all I wanted to do was, achieve those distances. And then once I had the finish down, so to speak, I wanted to work on getting faster at those distances. And here we are today, still hooked.
So you finished Chicago. It's your first marathon. Was that your first race?
Yeah, there might have been a few 5Ks in there, but that was in my memory. That's my first race.
What was that finish line like?
Oh, it was unreal. I mean, major marathons, the streets are lined the whole way, and it was just I felt like Superman crossing the finish line in 5 hours and a half or something.
So you crossed that finish line. It's incredible. You probably went and got some deep dish or something like that,
Hmm.
and and you decide I got to keep going. I got to run longer and more. Talk about that progression.
Yeah, so keep in mind at this point, I don't even know that hundreds or 200s exist. I know that trail running exists. And one day I stumbled upon it doesn't exist anymore, but the North Face Endurance Challenge used to have trail running, ultra running series. And I was out for a hike, and this race happened to be going on while I was there, and I was like, "What is this? All these people running around, no shirts, just a single water bottle in their hands. This looks really cool." Went home, Googled it, and signed up for the DC 50. This is back in 2012, 13. And then from there, it was just like, let me climb this distance ladder. And then got up to the 100-mile distance. In 2016, I had hip surgery, late 2016, early 2017, FAI, impingement, labrum repair. So bilateral hip surgery. And it was kind of this big question mark of, am I going to be able to keep doing what I love to do, which is where 200 milers enter. It was kind of let me pick the gnarliest, scariest thing I can think of to prove to myself that I can still do what I want to do, as opposed to starting small and working my way up and being smart about it. Um, and that brings us to 2018 when I run my first 200 at the Bigfoot 200, and it just went so well, and it was such a different experience, and I just was hooked like never before. Like, these are my people, and this is my distance.
So there's a lot in there. One part I'm curious is about in regards to when you were told like this might, or when you were thinking that you might not be able to do what you loved anymore. I had a conversation with Mike Wardian in 2019 on this podcast. It was, I don't know, episode 20 or something like that. I'll put it in the show notes. And the previous year, he had raced 1,600 miles. And so 1,600 miles is like, for a lot of people, more miles than they run in a year. And I asked him, why do you race so much? Why do you run so much? He's currently running across the country. And when this episode airs, he'll either be close to the East Coast or back on the East Coast. Right now, he's in Nevada. Um, and I asked him, I was like, why do you do this? And he's like, man, one day I won't be able to. And I want to be satisfied that I've done everything and I've never said no to adventure or to fun or things that I enjoy and really live with no regrets and, say yes to adventure, all these, taglines that outdoor
Sure.
companies have, never stop exploring, etc. So I'm curious your thought process when it was at least temporarily taken away from you.
Yeah, and I think it's similar to the way Mike is looking at it. For me, it was bleak for a little while there. I went to three different surgeons and was presented with three different plans of attack for fixing my issues. I ultimately went with the one that looked like it was going to get me returning to running, the quickest and the most effectively. Because the others were pretty much saying, running and certainly ultra running is probably not a significant part of your future. And I'm not saying you shouldn't trust doctors. I certainly don't believe that, but I do think that there needs to be some healthy speculation and seeking out different opinions. So that's what I did back in 2016 with the desire to. If I couldn't run, I still wanted to be able to, move outside and, explore the mountains, explore trails. That's where I'm happiest. So my ultimate goal was to still be able to be, an active outdoorsman. And it turned out to be the best decision I've ever made. I mean, I'm pain free in that area. Everything else hurts, but my hips don't. Um, and I've been able to finish 6 official 200 milers since then, and a couple of similar distance, solo powered adventures.
I find these types of events are so fascinating, right? Because a lot of people I've talked to, they enjoy them because it's just an excuse to be out on trails for, days at a time.
Hmm.
Um, those days are littered with like hallucinations and like terrible feelings. And I paced a friend last summer at Ure, and I started running with her like 26 hours in, and she was hallucinating within a few hours of us starting to run together. Like Indiana Jones showed up on a 4,000-foot climb, and it was just like, let's now stuff as many calories into her face as we can, and like get
Right.
her out of this. So I'm curious, like, what are you thinking about when you're standing on the start line, having already done this and knowing, at least to some degree, what could potentially lie ahead? Like, every race is different, but you've probably seen some things by now, and you have an idea of how this goes. What are you thinking about, or are you just run the mile you're in, run the first mile, run the second mile?
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm very much a thinker and a planner versus the running the mile I'm in. So I will say that having done 6 of these, I try to. I like to think I know what it's going to be like, and every time I'm totally surprised and fooled. Like for usually I kind of map it out as like a fun factor. Well, it's going to be 10% type 3 fun, 50% type 2 fun, and 40% type 1 fun. And that sounds fine. I can wrap my head around that. But for example, this last one at Cocodona was probably 10% type 3 fun and 90% type 2. There was not much type 1 fun. Um, and I think what I tend to do is, instead of wrapping my head around the mile I'm in or the next aid station, is when I'm at that start line, I have an idea of which day I'm going to finish on, and I'm just out there till that day. Regardless of how I feel or what I'm doing. I get to stop on that day. So in this case, the race was going to be done for me on Thursday morning, Thursday evening, somewhere in between there. So I just need to get to Thursday, and then I can stop. And that's kind of the mantra I roll with. I've been told it kind of sounds insane, and that like, oh, you're just going to be out there that long, great, but you still have a lot of work to do to get there, which is true. But you're so focused on kind of keeping the machine going and the things you need to do in order for that to happen that the time just passes. There's so much more to think about and to monitor in these long races. And yeah, that's kind of how I get through it.
So what are you thinking about and monitoring, right? Because I'm so curious about this, but I also think that a lot of the listeners, many of them are trail runners, many of them have run ultras, and many are road runners who, focus on 5Ks or half marathons or marathons. And I think for a lot of people, this space is like completely unknown. I mean, I know a lot of people who have done this and it still feels completely unknown. So I'm curious, like, how do you stay in it when did Cocodona start? What day of the week?
Monday morning, a
Okay.
week last week. Yeah.
So Monday morning it starts and you're like, all right, I'm going to be done on Thursday. So my week, Monday is an off day. Tuesday I run 8 miles. Wednesday I run between 10 and 12 miles and maybe double. And Thursday maybe I'll run another 8 to 10 miles. And here you are putting 250 miles in that same, I don't know, 30 something mile, 30-mile stretch I'm used to. I'm so curious. Like, I mean, like the I've watched a number of 100-milers, and it's fascinating that like I can go for a run and eat a meal and then take a nap and then eat another meal and then sleep and then wake up and people are still running. But
Yeah.
but this is that times like 2.5. So how do you stay engaged and motivated and persist? And the reason I'm asking is not because I think a lot of people listening to this are, going to go out and run 250 miles, but here's yet another example of how running can extrapolate to life, right?
Sure.
We are all doing hard things. Life is hard. There are a lot of variables that pop up, and it's all about our ability to persist and move on in the face of adversity. And so here's an example of like you're choosing discomfort, you're choosing to do something that's like remarkably challenging from both a physical and a mental standpoint. So how do you do it?
No, I love this question. I think the short, simple answer is you don't. Um,
That's it.
and
Episode over.
yeah, that's it. We're done. Thanks for having me. But seriously, I mean, you don't keep your eyes on the prize that whole time. You don't stay motivated that whole. They're, in a 100-miler, you could very well have, one peak high and one peak low. There could be more than that, but that's a reasonable thing that can happen. And in these longer multi-day races, I mean, you could have, you could start having these severe lows 11 miles in, and then, by mile 27, you're on top of a mountain and you have a high, and it's a constant ebb and flow of emotion and motivation. And I think experience helps know that, just because you feel this way now doesn't mean you will a little ways down the road. Just because this thing hurts now doesn't mean it will later. These races are so far from linear, which is funny because typically they are very linear in the sense that they start in one place and end in another. But they they really are so far from linear in the way they play out. It's a roller coaster of everything: emotions, physical pain, physical elation, and it is really hard to keep your eyes on the prize. So I think having a really strong why at the core of it all is important. If you don't want these races more than anything, you will find not just a way to quit. You'll find 25 ways to quit. So hope that kind of answers that question. But it is very up and down out there.
Yeah, it's the whole process versus outcome aspect. Like you cannot be outcome focused because it's too much, right? You
Hmm.
cannot think about I have 250 miles to run between Monday and Thursday or 250 miles to
Yeah,
travel between Monday and
yeah,
Thursday. Like the brain I don't think can comprehend no matter how many times you've done it, like how to break that down. Whereas let's get to Monday night, let's get to Tuesday morning, let's get to, the next
exactly.
aid station, let's get to like that tree over there, let's get to Indiana Jones.
Yep.
Um, so you mentioned your why. You have to know your why, and it's critical in ultras. I also think it's very critical in marathons. The best marathon I've ever run, I was fully present to my why. And when things started to get really challenging, I reminded myself of why I was there and why I really wanted to make the next 6 miles really, really freaking painful. And then I
Hmm.
did, and I PR'd, and it was fantastic. So for you, you're standing on that start line. What was your why? What were you thinking about?
I was thinking about how much work I had put into this one. This last one, I averaged 15 hours of training for over 6 months a week. I was thinking of how much I had been, kind of dreaming of that finish since I crewed and paced this race last year. I was thinking about how much beautiful scenery I was going to get to see in such a short period of time. I was thinking about the people that came out to support me and how excited I was to run with them through the nights and days. And I was thinking about how much I wanted to beat most of the people I was standing next to.
So for you, it's
Not not
community
so,
and
not so much that last one, but a little bit.
yeah. Well, we talked about that, and you thought you had a chance of doing, pretty well. So community and a little bit of healthy competition. Is that a good way to summarize it?
Yeah, I think so.
And also the celebration of the 6 months of 15 hours a week of training is a cool way to
Yeah.
look at it as well.
Yeah.
What does community mean for you? Maybe you can give a little background on what you do for work as well. So you're in it personally and professionally.
Yeah, sure. So community is, I mean, I love this community. For work, I work at Training Peaks. I manage Training Peaks coach match program. So I like to say I'm a professional matchmaker. Instead of helping people find significant others, I'm helping them find their coach, or I'm helping coaches find their athletes. And it's a super rewarding job. I love working in the endurance space, and yeah, it's been the best job I've ever had. I've been with Training Peaks for over 6 years now. Um, and community in this sport, I mean, the 200 community is the niche of the niche. Ultra running is pretty niche in and of itself, but the 200s are a different beast. And lining up for Cocodona last week, I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with people I've raced with before, people I've met through this sport, and it really feels like a family. And I'm about as least a sappy person as you could find, but it really does. I mean, these people are people that I consider friends, even though I've only maybe shared a mile run with them. um, and then it's so highlighted out there, where if you're struggling or something's going on, or even at the top of the field, if you're getting past, the person will ask if you need anything. They'll offer to give you some calories, some hydration, some you know NSAIDs or drugs if you need them, if you're looking rough. It really is this sense of community that from the top to the bottom of the race, that like we're all out there together, and everyone wants everyone else to finish. I've never met someone who's like just blowing past me and not asking how I'm doing.
Do you think that that's by nature of what it takes to complete a race like this? Like, you can't be an asshole and run these races, right? It doesn't seem possible.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it takes so much to do it that everyone out there realizes how hard it is. And everyone, if you're feeling low and someone comes by and witnesses that, they were feeling low, not so long ago. So they
10
intimately
hours ago.
know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. Yesterday. Um, they know, and then they're more than willing to help, and they're more than willing to not sacrifice their race, but sacrifice some time, and spend a few minutes with you. And I think that's just you don't find that in many sports.
A lot of times people hear about runners doing long races and they're like, you're crazy. And then there's ultras, and then there are ultras. How do people respond to hearing about what you're doing? Maybe it's your family, maybe it's I doubt it might be your coworkers because they're like in it as well. But people who aren't in the 200 plus category, how do they respond when they find out what you do for fun?
You do get, I mean, the first thing you get usually is you're crazy, or you get the I don't like to drive that far. My favorite was when training for this 250 was I don't like to ride my bike that far. I liked that one. I felt like that was a fun twist on the old I don't like to drive that far. But
Yeah,
I think most people just kind of admire the effort. And I will say the race organization Aravaipa that puts on this last one I did, the Cocodona 250. They live stream the whole race, and it was truly remarkable how much coverage they were able to get and how well they did. And I think the coverage of this race gave people who may not have had any idea what these are like a really great kind of view of what it takes to traverse 250 miles on foot. And I think I've had quite a few messages of people who tuned into the live stream who are like, man, I didn't realize that that's what it was like. I didn't realize this or that. And that was really cool. Sort of eye opening for them to see, at least visually see what this course looks like, and what, hey, I saw that guy on Monday. Now here he is again on Thursday, and still moving, and he looks a little dirtier. um, but it really put it into perspective for a lot of my friends and family. And that was really cool. So kudos to Aravaipa for changing the game when it comes to the live coverage.
for sure. It's really cool what race organizations have been able to do in the woods, whereas like
Yeah.
we can't get good coverage of the women's race of a major marathon. It's like
Seriously.
these guys these guys can follow a bunch of trail runners around for 250 miles in the woods, and have stabilized video of them running up mountains, and we can't
Yeah.
watch them running down Fifth Avenue. Really, really makes you think.
Yeah, that's a different podcast.
Yeah, we'll leave that one to somebody else. Anyways, I want to hear about your lowest point.
Yeah. So for me, it's almost always night 3. I have yet to conquer night 3. I turn into like just a terrible toddler. And this night 3 was rough in particular. I left for a 27-mile stretch at about 3 p.m. So a 27-mile stretch without crew. And I left at about 3 p.m. and I didn't bring a puffy jacket. I brought a light jacket, light gloves, and a buff, and that was not enough. So I ended up rolling into the next crewable aid station at mile 213 at a little after midnight. And that stretch between 10 p.m. and midnight was really, really low. I was very, very cold. I want to say it got down into the 20s, and I was not prepared for that. And at that point, you have so much trouble kind of thermoregulating just from being out and exposed for so long, and your body's so tired that it has a really hard time keeping its heat up. So at that point, I had 30 minutes of sleep. I was a little over 60 hours in, and just kind of shutting down. I was starting to stumble, starting to think really irrationally. Like I wanted to lay down in the cold, but it was too cold to do so. So I wanted to sprint as fast as I could, but my body wouldn't let me sprint as fast as I could. Kind of just mumbling incoherent complaints to my pacer. My memory of that stretch is a little fuzzy, but I remember it's the only time where I ever thought I really don't want to be here. I would give anything to be anywhere else but here. And I felt that way all the way to the aid station until I got warm, some sleep, and my crew had Domino's for me at that aid station, and man, that fixed everything.
If you've been enjoying this podcast and can spare 90 seconds of your time today, can you do me a favor? Can you pop over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review? It helps other people find and enjoy the podcast too. Thanks so much. Thanks again to Freedom Solar Power for supporting this episode of the podcast and our environment by providing an easy, green energy source. The buying process was fascinating and eye-opening, and I am excited to pay my learnings forward. If you're curious about going solar in your home, message me on Twitter or Instagram, and I'd be happy to help your journey by providing some great resources. Freedom Solar is a full-service solar company that's been installing solar panels and backup power systems since 2007. They operate in Texas, Colorado, Virginia, and Florida. Not in any of those states? Don't fret, my parents have the same panels from SunPower that were installed by a different company in Massachusetts. SunPower is the best in the business, and that's what Freedom Solar uses. I've enjoyed working with the whole team over at Freedom Solar, and I'm sure you will too. Thanks again to Hydro for supporting the podcast. I've been enjoying my Hydro to fit in bonus cardio that doesn't take much time at all, as even a 10 to 15 minute row feels like a solid workout. It's a fun experience to be able to row on familiar routes or explore new ones on the water. Head to hydro.com, that's HYDROW.com to learn more. Be sure to use the code FTLR100 to save $100 on your order. Thanks again to Tracksmith for supporting the podcast and their continued support of not just this podcast, but the running community in general. I'm proud to partner with Tracksmith, and they're going to donate 5% of your order to the Michael J. Fox Foundation for all orders, and you'll also get free shipping. The Michael J. Fox Foundation is dedicated to finding a cure and helping those living with Parkinson's. Both of my grandfathers have or had Parkinson's, and I'm grateful of Tracksmith's support for something so personal. Visit tracksmith.com/forthelongrun to see some of my favorite pieces, and all orders with the code FORTHELONGRUN, one word, will contribute towards this donation. Their spring collection is now available and features staples thoughtfully designed for this season of training. How do you carry on when you're in a place like that where, right, like my barometer of do I continue on a long run or do I not is like when it's no longer fun.
Mm-hmm.
And like when it's no longer even type 2 fun, I'm not sure that I enjoy type 3 fun. And so like I don't have a desire to get there yet.
Yeah.
Maybe I will eventually, but not today. So that's it for me. Curious for you, like so first those 27 miles took you 9 hours?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a slow stretch.
So in those 9 hours, at what point did you realize you might be a little underprepared?
Yeah, so it was before the sun went down. When I realized how long it was taking, I realized it was going to take us. I was hoping to be, into the next aid station by like 8 or 9 p.m. So just after sunset. When I realized how slow we were moving, I realized that we were going to be out there well after dark, that it was going to get quite cold, and that, my inventory was this, and I didn't have the tools I needed to stay warm. So that put me in a pretty sour mood going into the night, which is never a good thing. And as soon as the sun goes down in these things, I mean, you turn into a different person, or at least I do. And to be clear, no one enjoys type 3 fun. I don't either. But you're out there, it's a possibility, and you're just trying to mitigate it and have as little type 3 fun as you can. And for me, going into night 3, and this night 3 in particular, like, I mean, there were certainly times where I would have liked to drop and would have liked to stop. I don't think you get through a 250-mile race without wanting to drop, but um, it was never like a real option for me. I think when I'm in those situations where I'm not having fun anymore, it's a constant reminder of, you know, it's going to be fun again. Even if that means just the finish, that part's going to be fun. The old adage of "I paid for this," which is true. These races are not cheap, and not only did I pay for this financially, but I paid for this with so much time. I put so much into this, and then my last kind of line of defense is when I want to drop, or when I want to just sit down and cry, is like, if I do that, like, what's happening tomorrow? Like, am I gonna go back to the finish line and cheer on other runners? Am I gonna go out to breakfast? Am I gonna, do any of the normal activities that people do post race? And if the answer is yes, then I have no business, doing anything but moving forward. Unless I'm going straight to the hospital, or back to a hotel room where I can't, like, physically get out of bed and can't move, then there's no reason to stop.
So what's the carryover into life? How do you take that ability to persist and apply it to Kevin outside of 200 and 250-mile races?
Oh man, if I could figure that out, I'd be so successful. No, I do think there's a lot of crossover with that into life. I mean, nothing out here in the quote unquote real world is as, uncomfortable as what we choose to put ourselves through in these races. Even when you're having a rough day, I mean, nothing comes close to that night 3 wrapped in a space blanket, shuffling along at 1.2 miles an hour. It really doesn't. So to have those experiences and be able to think back and call back to those feelings makes everything else feel, like something you can get through, like something you can conquer. And I think I pull on that a lot in my day-to-day life. Not that I have a difficult life by any means, but when I stub my toe or things don't go right, I mean, obviously that's not when I'm pulling on it. But when there are bumps in the road, it's really nice to have these experiences in my quiver and be able to think back to them.
For sure. So you mentioned if only you could figure that out, you'd be super successful. I'm curious what success means to you.
That's a great question. And I do consider myself super successful. I was being cheeky, but to me, success is time. I think time is the most valuable currency there is. I left New York City 7 years ago, and I just started making what I was making in New York City. So it took me 7 years to get back financially to where I was, but I've been making so much more in time since I got here, and I think that's what success is to me: time to do what you love with who you want to do it with.
Yeah, and I think that's the really cool thing about being out here in Colorado, that people don't really care about your 9 to 5. They care about your 5 to 9. And I've also realized that most people here don't work 9 to 5 anyways. So there's even less reason to care about that. But it's been a really interesting experience where, like, when people try to get to know who you are, they like really try to get to know who you are and what makes you tick, versus like trying to size you up and understand how much money you make, or where you went to college, or blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And I think I totally agree. Like, it's very hard to make me mad, and the best way to make me mad is to waste my time. And it's I completely agree that, like, success is being able to do exactly that.
Yeah, to do what you want when you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you've completed the 250 miles. What do you do next? Like, literally, what is next?
Like the moment you finish.
Day. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my hotel wasn't ready for check-in for another like 5 hours. So Next was sitting uncomfortably at the finish line, trying to get food and fluids in me for 4 hours while we called the hotel, begging them to let us go use a shower.
I just came from Phoenix
Yeah,
by
yeah. So
foot.
that's the pretty sides of 250s. But yeah, I finished Thursday early afternoon. It was really cool to hang out around the finish line, see the next few finishers come in, um, and then the few days after the 200 is actually really rough. I've heard other people have better experiences than me, but I'm usually so wrecked that I can't really sleep, despite physically needing to more than anything. So very fitful, short sleeps. Um, Usually, I have a hard time eating because my jaw and like tongue are so tired. A lot of people don't like even consider that a thing, but I don't think humans are meant to eat like every 30 minutes for 75 hours. Um, so like physically exhausted, like my eating muscles are physically exhausted. So the only thing I want to do, which is eat copious amounts of delicious food, is hindered by that. Am I making this sound fun?
This episode is
So
sponsored by our Vipa Run. Just sign up.
it's
It's fun.
yeah, just sign up. It's so fun. And yeah, so by day like by Saturday, a couple of days removed, I'm starting to like enjoy the simple pleasures in life again. Food, sleep, being clean, being able to lay pain free. Um but yeah, the 48 hours after the race for me was I had a lot of friends out there still running. So I went down to the finish line many times to kind of see their finishes. It's great to be able to track them and see them coming in. Flagstaff is a super cool city where the race finished. It was fun to hang out there, and yeah, it was just really nice to not be running anymore.
Well, if the 250 milers don't sound fun, this episode actually is sponsored by the Revel Race Series, which has a race in Arizona in September, and it's only a marathon. Or
There
you
you
could do
go.
Big Bear in August, and hopefully it won't take you 7 hours or 9 hours. Anyways,
Yeah.
yeah, these are the things that are so like you wouldn't think that your jaw can't move and you can't consume food or you can't sleep, when physiologically these are the things that your body needs most, and
Yeah.
you just can't do it. If you were to talk to someone who has run a bunch of miles, maybe they run a 50, maybe they've run a few hundreds, and they're considering doing something like this, besides don't do it, what would you tell them?
I tell them to do it. Look, if there's someone who enjoys ultras already, if there's someone who likes running 50s, especially if there's someone who likes running hundreds, it is such a different beast, but with similar joy points. That's not a thing, but I think you know what I mean.
Life high scores.
Yeah, I think their ultra is magnified, and I think everyone who already enjoys ultras should experience one once. I really think that they're like nothing else, and that you'll learn a lot about yourself going through one. So yeah, my advice is to at least explore signing up. Watch some documentaries, or better yet, crew and volunteer at one. I've also done that side of these races where I've been on the crew of a runner, or I've volunteered for the whole week of the race, and that actually is really fun, mostly type 1 fun. And you get a really a really good sense of what all goes into these races, and you get to see these people kind of accomplishing these bucket list dreams of theirs, and yeah, that's really cool. So volunteer at one first, and then go run one.
Yeah, the crewing and pacing or volunteering at an ultra is, I've mentioned this on the podcast before, I think it's a critical thing to do in life. Um, I've been to a handful of hundreds. The first was Western States, and then I went to what was it? Run Rabbit in Steamboat Springs, and I spent a few hours at the mile 50 aid station. And here you have people who don't know many of the runners, and they're just spending the entire day making sure other people simply stay alive and
Yeah.
show up and then leave, and do that on repeat for hundreds of runners or thousands of runners.
Yeah.
and it brings out the best people in the community. You can train for and race a marathon on your own, and I think there's a lot of value in doing that. You learn a lot about yourself. You can get really fit. You can have a lot of fun, meet some cool people, but you can't do this alone. It's impossible, and you can't finish if it's a solo effort. And that's the beauty of ultras. And I forget who I was having this conversation with, but it was also about marathoning, and it was like, I trained for the race myself, but I didn't run it myself, and I ran it with the people around me and the aids and the water stations and whatnot. And it's so cool how so many people contribute to the success of strangers. And I think it's a beautiful thing about the sport, and particularly as you go longer, it's even more essential.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It really does bring out the best people. I think Western States has something like 1,500 volunteers the race weekend. I mean, that's like 3 or 4 volunteers per runner. So you're literally getting a pit crew to work on you. And yeah, they make it possible. And the through these real long efforts, like the kindness of strangers too is pretty remarkable. People I would just meet on the street. So this race, Cocodona 250, runs through like a lot of historic downtowns in Arizona. It links together a bunch of towns, and I mean 10 p.m. some lady came out of her house and offered me peanut M&Ms. She was like watching the tracker. She knew my name, and things like that happen all the time in these races, and it really does bring out the best in the people, best in the communities, and the people that volunteer are just second to none.
Totally. Yeah, it's super cool. Um, the dog over here is trying to get a second breakfast. Speaking of pit crews and eating,
Yeah.
um, second breakfast is excellent. But sorry, Alfie, we're on to you. What would you say to Kevin right before he ran Chicago?
Oh God. Turn around.
And do
Okay,
what?
next question.
Turn
No,
around and
I
look.
would
Turn around and appreciate it. Look at all these
yeah,
amazing people around you.
turn around and don't run. Um, no, I think, yeah, God, if I was talking to Kevin pre-Chicago, man, it would blow my mind that I've done what I've done. I think I'd say buckle up and be smart about this, because this is what you're going to do, and it's going to be a hell of a ride. But I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, obviously, I wish I didn't have hip surgeries, and I wish a few other things didn't happen. But for the most part, it's been so fun, and to like to kind of extrapolate that the other direction, like in 2010 or whatever, when I ran Chicago, it would blow my mind to think about what I have done now. I wonder what I'll do in 10 years from now. Like, will it be as extreme of a mentality shift, or it's cool to think about, because the sport's growing, and there's going to be other dumb shit to sign up for. That's for sure.
Do you ever think about like the path your life took, and like what if your girlfriend at the time wasn't running Chicago and you didn't join her on those 16-mile runs? Do you ever think about that?
I do. I think about it all the time, all the time, actually, and like that, and like, what if we never left New York? Because I feel like New York was really kind of hindered our passion. A lot of people, they'll say, don't let like your one hobby or running define you. Which, if I lost running, I would pivot and find other passions, and there are other things I enjoy in life, but it does define me. There's no way around it. Like, running defines me. It's who I am. So at this point in time, I can't imagine my life without it. So yeah, I reflect on that a lot, of like these little choices you make, and these little happenstance meetings in life lead to running 250 miles through the desert and mountains of Arizona. And again, if you had told 2010 Kevin that, hey, there's this race 12 years from now that you're going to do, and this is what it looks like. I mean, I I can't even just thinking about it and joking about it sounds like so silly.
I mean, it is. I want to dig more into the defining yourself as a runner. It's something that I've struggled with, or not struggled with, but like thought a lot about. The first recording I ever did was with Ben Rosario out in Flagstaff, and it was 220 something episodes ago. So I didn't really know what I was doing at all. I think it was episode number 2. And he said, if running is all you have, I feel bad for you. Because what happens when it's not going well, or what happens when you're injured? And I've reflected on this a couple of times on the podcast with other guests and brought this up. And some will interpret that as like, you have to have other pieces that are more than just your own running. So if you're a coach, or if you're working with other runners, or if you're doing things more than just yourself. And others will say like having hobbies like playing the guitar, or, tennis, or whatever it might be. And personally, like I work at a company that we don't focus in running, but a lot of my focus is in running. I have a running podcast. I run a lot. Most of my friends are runners. It sounds like something similar is true for you. And so I'm curious if you've thought about that, and then what happens when it's not going well.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, not to put words in Ben's mouth, but for me, I think change, if running is all you have, to if running is all you use or focus on, because that's what I'm doing. Running is not all I have. If I were to go break my leg today, I love fly fishing. I love reading. I've seen everything Netflix has. I love TV. I love all sorts of media. I have 2 dogs that I love. I love paddleboarding. I love, I guess that's it. No. But there's I have tons of hobbies, but running is what I have chosen to pour myself into. So I don't think running is all I have. I think running is all I've chosen to focus on. It does define me. It is a huge part of me. I would be devastated if I lost it, but I would certainly not be, ruined if I lost it. I would find I do have other passions. I think it's just, we all have 100%, and we can choose how much of that we want to pour into various things. I've chosen to pour 90% of that into running. And so that's kind of how I view it. Whereas it is a massive part of me. It is what I've let define me in the recent history, and hopefully in the future. But it's certainly not all I have.
That's a good way to put it. I like that a lot. Is gratitude a component?
Nah, it's all me. No, I'm just kidding.
That's the New Yorker in you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, so I cried at the finish line at Cocodona 250. I've never cried at a finish line before, and it was like an ugly cry. Like there are pictures to prove it.
Is there audio?
I don't know. I'll find out for you.
We're gonna have to investigate.
Yeah, it was a real ugly cry, and like I was crying. Like there were tears of gratitude. Like I was just so thankful for fucking everything. Like it was just like an overwhelming like feeling of gratitude for the people that came out to support me, my wife, the race organization, the competitors I was kind of in the final leg there with, my body, my training. It was really overwhelming. So yeah, gratitude is a huge part of. I mean, you can't, like we talked about earlier, you can't do this stuff alone. It takes a village. It takes a huge support system. And I think I have one of the best, really, really solid one. I couldn't ask for more. So yeah, gratitude is everything.
Very cool. Well, when the legs and I guess jaw and tongue are healed, we should get back out for another long run and chase Andrew around some trails out here. Kevin, I really appreciate the chance to chat through this with you. It's personally a fascination, and just like really interesting to hear how you break it down mentally, and how you can stand on a start line on a Monday and not really know what time on Thursday you'll be finishing the race. So thank you for indulging me on my curiosity on that, and for sharing it with the audience. It's been fun chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Of course. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next time on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. This podcast and the accompanying music has been produced by Brian Walters of Single Track Sound. For the Long Run's logo was created by Vanessa Wolf of Sterling Wolf. Show notes have been written by Ruby Wiles and is managed by Emily Holland. It takes a village.